This clock is correct, so 8 minutes for the deciding Game 3 between the players. They're going to have to play at a clip. Clock now correct. We're at correction to 9 minutes, and Jones is going to be on a mulligan. Now, okay, let's start up with this matchup because I think we'll be seeing more of it this weekend. But it's one of these are the top decks of the format right now, battling against each other. One of the first things I ask in these mid-range mirrors is going late. If this game makes its way to turn 10, turn 11, who do you like in the matchup?
So the spell quality just generally favors Green-Black Delirium. The longer the game goes, the better their top decks are. The real strength of the White-Blue Flash deck is finding a way to get ahead and stay ahead. Gideon, ally of Zendikar, is phenomenal on turn 4, but Ishkana, Graph Widow, into Emrakul, the late game is just there for Black-Green Delirium. And that's why the innovation that was so important for the Flash deck is that 2-mana counterspell, to try to find that way to just stay ahead.
All right, both players keep David keeping on 6. Both players playing out their early turns quickly. For Jim, it's Traverse into a land. For David, it's a Thraben Inspector. Jim's turn 2 play is his first threat. It's a copy of Grimflayer. Card we saw do so much work for Jeff Hoagland. For David Jones, going to be a Smuggler's Copter. He will pass the 3/3 there. Now, is this the kind of thing where he might set up to block, or is that too risky?
I assume that's going to be the play. I mean, Jim is likely up to Grasp of Darkness one way or the other.
All right, swings. David just takes. Trigger. Traverse. Flare. Pilgrim's Eye. Which ones does Jim want? Second Flare is usually welcome. There's also a Natural State out of the sideboard in Jim's hand, and that one a big player in the face of the Smuggler's Copter.
Definitely. See how Jim has to optimize his mana here. You know, one of the arguments for not crewing the Copter and trying to block is that you might force Jim to use his mana inefficiently, but that does not seem to be the case here.
Transgress the Mind from Jim takes care of Reflector Mage. Last 2 cards in David Jones's hand are Spell Selfless Spirit and 2 copies of the card Key to the City. Those out of the sideboard here that David has brought in. Jim with a really great start, though. He's just going to Natural State the Smuggler's Copter as well.
And Key to the City, big argument. Like, the reason you would play this card in this matchup is to punch through an Ishkana once it resolved. I understand the merit there, though.
On
Jim
this board, it's no good.
Yeah, Jim's trying to just run David out of stuff. He's trying to kill all the creatures. So I'm not convinced of the efficacy of Key to the City, though I do understand the reasoning behind it.
Yeah, you normally see that card in the red-black decks, or decks that want to use Madness, where they aren't. David's actually playing it fair. He's going to discard a card every time.
Yeah, and assuming he has the lands, he does get to redraw, so it is just looting, but you know, the Madness deck is actually taking advantage. They're looting and plus getting a little bit more for their trouble.
2 mana to loot is good, not great. 2 mana to Madness is great.
That deck also just has way more reach. You'll have Fiery Temper, you might have Alms of the Vein, so punching through for 2 points matters a lot more.
So David played the Selfless Spirit. Jim then swings with Grim Flare. David down to 16 here. 14 make it. The Grim Flare already up to 4/4. Delirium already enabled. So that will connect. Then Jim will add a second Grim Flare. That's the card he kept on top. He'll put a Vessel of Nascency next to it and pass the turn. No 4th land, but he's got 8 power worth of creatures in these 2 Grim Flares.
And Jim has seen the hand. He doesn't suspect a Declaration in Stone, and there are indeed not any in Jones's list. Not terribly common to see too many of those at a blue-white flash.
No, I mean, and Jim has left David with 2 keys to the city, and I just don't think he's going to care about them. So now he has to beat the cards off the top of the deck for David. For Jones, he's picked up a Smuggler's Copter for the turn. And that will be the play. So the 3/3, now back on blocking duty. He's going to pass the turn to Jim. A 3rd Grim Flare to pick up for Jim. Grapple, Vessel, Flare. Make that Grapple Traverse Flare. Those are the cards in Jim's hand.
It's like Jim's thinking about using one of those green spells to just find some mana, maybe grapple into a land and cast a Grim Flare on the same turn.
Jim swings. David's going to double block with Smuggler's Copter and Thraben Inspector. Loot away one of those keys to the city. And then before damage, David will make his creatures indestructible. He goes down to 10. The Grimflayer hits. Jim looks at the top 3. Sees Ishkana, Mindrak, Demon, and land. The land is a Hissing Quagmire. That's interesting whether or not Jim will take it, because it's going to come into play tapped if he does.
And now that he's used the Grimflayer, he can't use Grapple or Traverse to find something he wants to do this turn and leave a card that he wants on top of his deck.
Right, so what he did is he put all 3 cards in the graveyard, played his replacement Grimflayer, and now is traversing. I imagine he'll just, if he's getting a land, he'll just traverse. I was going to say for Hissing Quagmire, Jim's going to go ahead and traverse for his 4th copy of Grimflayer.
Yeah, Grimflayer has proven to be good against everything that David is up to. Why not just get more of those?
Them. Yeah. So we go back to David Jones. He's at 10, Jim at 19. He looks like he's behind, but maybe he can do more. Thraben Inspector the play. He gets another clue. That's his 2nd one. Key to the City, the last card in his hand. He will pass. Looks like he's setting up to crack a clue. Both flares swing in. Pair of 4/4s. Jones down to 10. He can trade the Smuggler's Copter away with a Grimflayer.
Oh.
He goes for the crew, and in response, Jim's going to appetite for the unnatural, the Smuggler's Copter. A huge blowout. Copter destroyed. Jim to 21. Here's 8 power with a trample. No good blocks for Jones. He'll go to 2. Jim will get 2 flare triggers.
And there's just not much that Blue-White Flash can do about this. As we discussed earlier, Jones doesn't have any Declaration in Stones.
Well, it's like you're trying to play Tempo against a deck that's playing 4/4 tramples for 2. That's Tarmogoyf's good against Tempo.
Yep.
David draws. He has a land, 2 more lands. That's not going to do it. And there's the hand. Jim Davis, the champion from last year, he's going to go ahead and win this one in 3. He also improves to 4-0.